Okay, so this video is about the process of trying to come up with a body of work. So artists sometimes spend days, weeks, months, even years, possibly decades, working on one theme or one idea to create a body of work. They're just trying to explore that idea in lots of different ways to create many images that work together and really describe that idea. So, um, when you are trying to come up with a body of work, sometimes it's just, you're overwhelmed. Like, oh my God, well, there's so many different ways to be a photographer and so many different ways to be an artist. And how do I come up with something? Well, my advice is be true to yourself. But beyond that, and pursuing your own interests and being true to yourself and what kind of art you like making, I have a little system that may help you. So, usually when you're taking photos, let's look at this top row. You are taking photos of, people, places, or things, or some combination. People in places, or things with people, or, whatever. But at least one of those things you're photographing. And then how do you go about photographing them? Well, there's kind of three main ways. So one is directed. So that is setting things up. People like Gregory Crewdson set things up. They have someone stand here and someone stand there, and they change the lighting, almost like a movie, like directing a movie. The photographer decides where everything's going to be and puts it there. The next one is reportage, which is more like kind of reporting, like just this thing is in front of me. I didn't move it around or change it, but I'm going to take a picture of it. Of course, you as the photographer, even if you're doing reportage, are still making active choices. You decide how to frame what's in front of you. You decide what time of day. You decide what shutter speed and aperture. You decide the angle. You decide all those things. But you're not making something happen in front of you. You are photographing what is there. And some people really prefer to work that way, which is fine. And then some people like to photograph things. Maybe they photograph several different things and put them together or whatever. But the whole idea in their mind, whether it's directed or reportage or something, is that ultimately they're going to use a lot of Photoshop and make some big changes. And then the last row is kind of the reason that you're taking photos. Is it just purely visual? And I'm going to show you examples in just a moment. Is it just something that's purely visual? Principles and elements of design, geometric, organic, whatever, but it's just about the way something looks. And that's the most important reason for it existing, is about the way it looks. Sometimes it's something conceptual. There's an idea that you want to get across, and you use your art to communicate in that way. And the last one is sometimes people do work that's very highly personal to them, to their own lives or the lives of people that they love. So let's look at some examples. This is a project by Margaret Stratton. It's called Inventory of My Mother's House. I believe she did it after her mother passed away, and she went into her mother's house and she took all these different objects and she put them in a studio background and photographed them. So if we look at our little chart, this is about things, right? And I guess you could say it's kind of directed because she decided that it was going to be on a black background. She decided what the lighting was going to be, and that it's highly personal to her. This is Annie Leibovitz. She went on tour with the Rolling Stones. She's had a long career and done a lot of different kinds of photography, but she started out doing reportage. She didn't necessarily tell the Rolling Stones what to do. She just went along, followed them along on tour, photographed them on stage, on their, I think that's an airplane, in the elevator at a hotel, hanging out, doing whatever it is that they're doing. So that's mostly people. Yeah, it's in places and they have things, but the point is the people. It's reportage. She didn't set it up. She didn't Photoshop it. There wasn't even Photoshop back then. And you could say this really visual, or I do know that she became friends with the band. So you could say it's personal as well. But she was sent by Rolling Stones magazine to follow the band Rolling Stones. So you could just say the whole point of it is to visual. So all their fans could see what their life was like. All right. This photographer, he is an architectural photographer. And so his work is all about places. He's not setting things up. He didn't build the buildings. He's not photoshopping it. And of course he's editing it in Photoshop, but he's not like putting things in that weren't there and heavily changing things. So it's reportage. He's just photographing what's in front of him. And the point is highly visual, right? It's about how it looks and these strong graphic geometric shapes. This is Dawood Bay. So he did this whole series about kind of invoking the Underground Railroad. So it's about places. And some of the images actually are places that were way stations in the Underground Railroad on the escape to freedom. It's reportage in that he didn't direct it. Yes, he did edit it in Photoshop, but it's not like he added stuff in. I'll show you an example in a second. And it's conceptual. He used his processing materials. So materials where he went to photograph, his process, the fact that he edited them. He took them at night. He edited them to be very dark to kind of show what it would have been like going at dusk or in the moonlight or whatever, but trying to travel along the Underground Railroad to freedom. So this is one where Photoshop comes in. So this guy is from France, and he Photoshops in, here's the Millennium Falcon and R2-D2 and C-3PO and what's that called, an X-Wing fighter or whatever. But he photoshops them into like real life. And this was actually done by a student of mine. And so she did a conceptual piece. She had this idea. What if there was a young woman who had lost her husband? And so it's about people. It's directed. She set it up. She had her model. She told her model what to do. So her model dealing with the grief, sitting with her husband's shoes. So she set up in her mind, like, okay, I'm going to have a model act like she's a widow. What would she do? How would she interact with her dead husband's things? And so that's how these images relate to this chart. So when you're trying to come up with these things, you can do kind of like a mind map like this, where you actually have several different ideas. You know, you can think of an idea and then you can draw lines to it and say like, oh, this has to do with people. It has to do with places. So if this was something about juxtaposing people and what they're wearing with the location, so their outfit would match the location. So it's very visual. It's directed. They're setting things up. It has to do with people and places. And that's how this idea connects to those three lines. It wouldn't have a lot of Photoshop. It's not necessarily personal. It doesn't have to do with the artist's life or anything. So that is one way to come up with it. Or just kind of looking at the chart. Let's go back to the beginning. Looking at the chart and kind of thinking like, okay, well, as a photographer, what do I like doing? I like taking pictures of people. Or some photographers hate taking pictures of people, and they really like taking pictures of places and landscapes and everything. And then you say to yourself, like, okay, do I like setting things up? Do I like just kind of walking around and encountering what's there? Or do I like doing tons of Photoshop? And then, like, how do I want, what's the meaning behind this project? Is it just visual? Is it conceptual? Do I have some big idea that I'm trying to get across, like that feeling of the Underground Railroad? Or is this something that's highly personal? Something about my life, some cause that I really care about, something that I'm passionate about. And if you pick a bunch of these, at least one per row, that might help you come up with a theme. So anyway, I hope that this little system is somewhat helpful in trying to figure out what you want to photograph. Especially if you are creating a body of work, it's something that you're going to be working on for a while. So you have to pick something that speaks to you. Don't pick something that's going to make someone else happy, a gallerist happy, a photographer, sorry, not, a photography teacher happy, your people in your life, make them happy. You have to be true to yourself. You're the one making the art. You're the one shooting it. You need to make work that is going to drive you, that is going to keep you interested. So think about the way that you work. Think about what's important to you, and then come up with the idea. Hope that helps.